Shilpa Ranade, an Indian designer, animator, illustrator, filmmaker, and an experienced academician. She was the chief guest for ENLIVEN Animation and Design Festival, and she's there with us. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so how do you feel about the festival, about ENLIVEN?
I found it really nice, and there's a lot happening, and it's a buzzing festival, and I think it's great for the young people here to be doing what they want to do.
Okay. So firstly, I'd like to ask about your journey. How do you start animation? What drew you into the field, and how has been your journey so far?
What drew me was actually getting to see some films, and that was very early on when I was about 15, 16, and I had just started going to college, JJ College of Applied Art, and those were the times when we had to actually make an effort to go watch films, and we didn't have so much going on television, and there was no internet either. So this was at a film club that I saw these Eastern European films, and they were so refreshing because it was something I had never seen before, and it was drawings that had come to life. And for me, I thought, this is exactly what I'd be wanting to do always, and so that's when the bug bit me. And I kept thinking, how do I learn animation? And I was in an applied art college. Of course, there was no animation there. There was no film either. But I kept watching a lot of films, and that was great learning, you know. And of course, I was drawing along the way. I kept drawing. That was my, what keeps me going is making images. And I kept thinking I need to go and learn animation, but there was nothing then, There were no institutes. Then I went and did a master's in design at IIT Bombay. And there too, I remember in the interview I'd said, I'm here to learn animation, and they said, no, you're in the wrong place. Because there was no animation teaching anyway. But then I self-learned a lot. And finally, I had a dream of going to RCA, and that's when I actually learned some animation and made films.
And what is the change in the institute? You were a student at once and you're a faculty right now.
Yes.
So what is the change that you see there?
It's a drastic change because change in today's times, on a yearly basis, there's change. When I was a student, we had limited specialities, and we had only visual communication, product design. And now we have 5 specializations. We also have an undergrad program. So a lot more students. Lot more students and a lot more very clued in students and very exposed to the world. They have the internet at their fingertips, and they have so much coming to them. There's a lot of self-learning, a lot of peer learning. So our roles have changed as teachers, So we are more like facilitators, and we have to listen and encourage and encourage good work basically. But yeah, things keep changing on a yearly basis.
How do you start with your with a new project? How do you conceive it from the initial stage? Now, what is your process?
Right. It's always been a very organic process. It's always been about things that interest me, and those can come anytime, maybe from a piece of literature, from a book I'm reading, or from a story in the newspapers, or something I hear, something I see. It all stems from something that has drawn me, and then I delve a little more into it, try and understand it a bit more, then see if a narrative can be built out of it. And imagery again is organic. It can't be forced on anything. So it takes me a while to conceive a project because I allow it to grow inside, and only then I start, formally making something out of it.
What about your award-winning film that we just screened, Gopika Vaya? How was the process of conceiving it? How long did it take? I wanted to ask you.
Yes. So it took 3 years in the making. And about 6 months before that, where we started thinking about the script and story, so that it's always a long turnaround with animation. Too many years, too much of labor, and it's a long drawn process. But other than that, for this film, it was again a very organic way it happened. I had seen this film. I had seen Gopika and Bagabain, the original by Satyajit Ray. Yes, I'd seen it at the. I told you I was watching films at these film clubs. So I'd grown up watching that film, and it was in my imagination, and I had loved the film. And later, because I was doing also book illustration, Scholastic had given me a book to do, and it turned out to be Gopika and Bagabain. And I was so thrilled because I said, oh my God, this is a throwback to the days I was watching films in the club. And but then this was a retelling by Gulzar. And again, I thought, oh my God, this is Gulzar, and all these stalwarts were involved in this story. And I said, what will I do with it? And I did a lot of research to try and make images for it. And I wanted it to be a throwback to the kind of images that they already had around this story earlier. And again saw the lineage, you know, it was Upendra Kishore Rai Chaudhary's story, then Sukumar Ray was his son, he made a lot of children's illustrations, then Ray made the film, and of course, I think absolutely every Bengali for sure would know the film, and a lot of Indians who watched cinema would know the film. So all this was there playing in my mind. But then, you know, the story is such a warm story, and it's such a, it's a welcoming story. So you don't feel that intimidation anymore. And then I just started drawing for it, you know, because the book again conjures up images. So for an illustrator, when you get a text and you're reading the text, the images are already forming in your head, you know. So from that I started drawing. And I did the first version of the book, then they did one more version in color of the book. And then while I was doing it, I thought this is great for a children's animation, because anyway I was an animator. So for me, book illustration and animation kind of go hand in hand. And that's when I proposed the film to CFSI, and they funded it, and then started the process. Yeah.
Okay. Like, what about your other films, like Money is Dying? Like, what is about the theme? Because we haven't watched that one.
Right.
Because this was screened here, we could watch it. So, like, what is the other films about mostly?
Yeah. So, a lot of my work has come from literature like this. And Money's Dying is also based on an extract from a long novel. And that novel is called The Cocoon. It was written by Dr. Bhalchandra Nimade in the 60s. And again, this piece of literature struck me, you know, and I thought, my God, this is so powerful, the writing, because it had again challenged all the norms of literature at the time, you know, and it broke all the linearity of storytelling. It went back and forth in time, and for me that was like very intriguing, interesting, and again it conjured up all kinds of images. And I made that as my graduation film at RCA. And it was quite an experience, because I was in some sense an untaught animator, because that's how RCA sees students. They like to keep them fairly raw and allow you to be who you are as an animator and not force anything on you, you know, as in terms of rules of animation. So I could approach the subject in my own manner. And it's a very, very tough subject actually. It's about the dying of this 5-year-old girl, and the letter that her brother gets from home, telling him that you have lost your sister, but don't worry, you have 3 more sisters. So you know, it's a very painful story. It's about coming to terms with, you know, how girl children are treated, first of all, and of course how this young man rebels against this whole notion of how carelessly her death is sort of perceived, you know, and how one has to come to terms with suffering and death. So it's it's about a 8-minute film.
8-minute film. Okay.
Yeah.
It's so, not as long as this one.
No,
right?
no, it's a short, and I enjoy making short subjects. Actually, I enjoy making short films. So Money's Dying has a special place in my heart, because I made it completely the way I wanted to make the film.
I guess both these films have an Indian influence, or the, you know, the Indian traditional folklore imageries and all that have a major role in your films. Like, how does that influence you as a person and your works? You know, what is the role that the Indian folklore and traditions have?
So, you know, when I was growing up, and I told you I saw those amazing films from Eastern Europe, and they were very rooted. I could see they're rooted
their
in
culture.
in their culture, for
Okay.
sure. And we were consuming very mainstream things otherwise in India, and we were seeing only cartoons coming from the West, coming from Disney specifically, and they had a very sort of a homogeneity about it, you know. It was the same black outlines and flat colors and comic kind of subjects. So I thought, you know, I need to treat my animation quite differently because I come from a different culture. I come from a culture that's very rich in storytelling, rich in imagery. Why don't I go back to my roots and see, you know, how I can do a takeoff from there? Why do I need to imitate something that comes from the West? So really that's what informed all my work. Even Money is Dying, I took a cue from one of the lines in the story where, you know, the protagonist goes to Ajanta and he's standing in front of this large Buddha image, and that's when he sort of all his anger dissipates and he comes to terms with death, suffering and all of that. And then I did it to take off from Ajanta painting, you know, so that for me became the springboard for the imagery. And of course there's no direct reference or direct influence of it, but certainly it's there as the root of the imagery and the movement.
Okay. And I guess, like I read somewhere that you've done a thesis on, you know, the Indian narratives in a socially relevant animation. So, like, what is that about? Like, how can we make our Indian animation into a socially relevant, you know, landscape that is worldwide?
Right. So, like the subject I told you, Money is Dying, was certainly about the girl child. And even my other work, I made another film called The Harvest, and that was about the man-woman, gender politics, basically. So all these issues are rampant and they're around us. It's about, you know, we should take cognizance of them and we should be able to tell our stories in the way, you know, only we can tell them. And another subject I had, I remember, was about a girl child wanting to study, and she was very keen on studying, but her parents can't send her off to school in the city and all that. She lives in a village and her school is only up to class 7. So all these issues attract me, they're important to me, and I feel stories can be told about these and should be told, you know, instead of just papering everything over. And even the film Gopika and Bhagabain is really about, it is very entertaining, but it is about, it's an anti-war message, it's a peace message. So for me, I think those values we need to talk about, you know.
Okay. And how do you choose the colors and the, it seems like those images have a, you know, there is some texture in it.
Yes, yes.
So like the texture and the color tones, can you talk about that?
I'm very fond of color as an artist. I enjoy working with color, and somehow Gopika and Bhagavan, because it's sort of generally a very happy story. These people are, the two protagonists are very simple and good people, warm people, good-hearted people, and they want the good of the people. And somehow the I wanted to make it look like a storybook, pop-up, cut-out kind of a thing. And I was also looking at puppetry, leather puppetry. So a lot of the color aspect has come from that study, from puppetry and from book illustration. So of course then it was like quite a riot of color, and the point was to do everything over the top. And so that aspect is also over the top in this film.
And you have an organization or something called Damru. Like, what is that about? What are the activities happening there?
So this is something we had established in IIT Bombay. Again, because children don't have any other outlet apart from sitting at their computers or, you know, looking into their phones now, or into an iPad and all of that. So we wanted to take them away from screens basically, and make books and do activities for them that will sort of make them draw and communicate with each other, just be, you know, in an analog world and stop being in that digital world. And
sometime into books.
Yes. So Damru is a little organization where we publish books and we have activities for children that bring them together. We make
Go
it through
for it.
Damru. Yeah.
Okay.
For children, basically.
Okay. And how important do you find the sound design for an animation film?
I think sound is the heart of the film.
Yeah, and this film has got a lot of musical elements,
Yes.
especially the musicians, the characters and
Yes,
musicians.
exactly. Because they are musicians, it's like really important. And we've had a lot of fun with the sound here. We did like a pan-Indian sort of sound. All the songs are from different parts of the country.
Yes,
They're
yes.
also sung by different people. So Gopi doesn't sing in one voice. He sings
Okay.
in the voice of the people.
Yes, yes.
And of course, we have a very nice sort of voice, not voice, a soundtrack, which is a lot happening on soundtrack. If you just listen to it, you will see that there's a whole narrative there. And Binil has worked on it, and he teaches here, so
Yes, yes.
and a brilliant, brilliant soundtrack he's done.
Yeah, there is a mix of cultures too. Like
There's a mix
I
of
just
culture.
recognize some sort of a chenda,
Oh, yes.
Shingari Melam element
Yes,
or so.
yes.
Yeah, that is there.
We
That is
used
very interesting.
all acoustic instruments. There's nothing, no digital stuff.
Okay. So about the casting, like where do you find those people from, and what was exactly their role in this?
So casting was by a casting director actually,
Okay.
and we got all theatre actors to do this because they are so good, you know, theatre people, because they have so much experience of stage, and stage is always a little about projection, you know, you project everything. So even their voices and all are always projected. And I think it works very well for animation because animation is a little bit of an exaggeration. So all theatre people did it, and sound came first. We did a whole scratch of the whole film first, and then animated to that.
Okay.
So sound here is paramount. It's very important. Also a busy soundtrack, a lot happening with dialogue. So we had to jam with the dialogue writer, the script writer, the lyric writer, and the music director, and the
Okay.
sound people. So we had to sort of work together to make it cohesive.
Okay. So, like, what is your take on AI taking up its potential and its disruption? All of that. There is so much discussion going on regarding that, right?
Right, true. So I think it's about, you know, literally about training your dragon and seeing whether you can make it work for you. And I think the possibilities are always interesting because it's a new thing for everybody. And change is bound to happen constantly. One has to embrace it and one has to work alongside it. I know a lot of people are skeptical, but I think it can be a very powerful tool. You know, use it as part of your toolbox, really. And of course, you have the freedom to not use it. You know, that's also there. In animation, it's possible to do without it as well. But using it to advantage, I think, is a sensible thing to do.
Okay. And I remember you saying in your speech, you know, the inaugural address, you said that it's not easy to be in this field. So, what were your struggles in this field?
Struggles are that there's no funding for it, you know.
Okay.
So, very few funding bodies. Of course, there are many platforms that will show your work finally, but getting to make a film of this magnitude and, you know, the kind of money that goes into it, it's very difficult to find. So, that's one big hurdle in our country. I think every other country does have a government agency that supports animation, you know, so it thrives in most other countries. And I think if we could have a little bit more of that, it would be very, very useful. So that's one big hurdle. Other than that, I don't think people, you know, people are certainly very good at all the tech.
Okay.
We are very good at tech in India. And we have very experienced animators also. We have a lack of directors who can tell good stories, and the funding aspect, as I said, these two are big challenges.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that the exposure level to animation in India is limited, or like mostly the students get attracted to the Disney things or the Tom and Jerry and all of that? So, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think a lot. See, the mainstream media you can't fight because
yeah.
it's always in your face. So
They
students
take a
do get it.
major
Yeah.
space, no?
Yes, they take a major space, and it's in your face. You can't do much about it. You have to sort of, everyone automatically consumes it and gets influenced as well. So I think the first influences are Disney and manga and anime. People get very attracted to it somehow. But I think it's important to realize that we have our own traditions of storytelling. And can I do a takeoff from there? Can I tell my own stories in the first place? Can I make images that are my own? I think that's an empowering thing. You know, when all that baggage is not there, then we'll begin to tell our own stories. And it's a very, very important thing to do. Students do get carried away by manga, and I think manga is amazing, and so is Disney, but in its place, you know, we don't need to imitate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your insights. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
To enlighten a lot more students like us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Media Village Television.